evening, Wood County. I'm Brooke Ebersole, General Manager here at BG24 News. Every week, we bring you the stories that matter most on campus, in the community, across the state, and across the nation. The Producers Panel is where we take a step back and talk about these stories in our own opinion. But these opinions do not reflect the views of the organization and do not impact the way we cover these or any other stories. Tonight, we'll be discussing the recent visit of BGSU alumni Jim Obergefell. Then we will be discussing the tragic shootings that occurred this morning at Northern Arizona University and Texas Southern University. We will also be discussing the controversy that a UCLA fraternity is facing after hosting a Kanye West-themed party and having guests show up in blackface. Finally, we'll dive into the recent polls that have named Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton as the most untrusted candidate. It's all here on your BG24 News Producers Panel. Thanks again for joining BGSU's Producers Panel tonight. I'd like to take a minute and introduce our panel here. To my right is Secretary and Assistant News Director Amy Steigerwald, and to the left is anchor and reporter Nick Dombey, and to my far left is our producer Isabella Meany. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for being here.
BGSU has had famous alumni in the past, but rarely alumni who have made history. This past week, Jim Obergefell came in to speak to around 600 people in the Bowen Thompson Student Union about how he helped make history. Obergefell's case, Obergefell versus Hodges, was the main case cited in the Supreme Court decision that recognized gay marriage. His story has inspired not only the country, but hit home for many young students at Bowling Green today. So I think it's not only cool that, look at how far we have come, but the fact that BGSU sort of has a personal tie with just the way this whole thing played out.
Right, and when I first heard about this, I was kind of confused as to how he played a role in the ruling, and when I finally got the full explanation, I was very shocked that he had such an impact on this nationwide decision, which is amazing that has a connection to BGSU. But I think that the personal connection he had with his ruling as well, he talked about how he can personally relate to gay marriage being legalized, and I think that makes it even a little bit more special and a little bit more meaningful for him, which is cool that he can connect that back to his life and the country.
Yeah, definitely. And before we were live on the air, Isabella was telling me he sort of has his own tragic love story.
Yeah, he has.
This
it's a really beautiful story, and it's sad, but it's so empowering to hear it. When he came to BGSU, he was talking about what basically his whole motivation with this case was his husband, and his husband did pass from Lou Gehrig's disease, and so they got married in the state of Maryland before it was legal everywhere. So the rush and doing it, and he was sick, basically on his deathbed when they got married, and he took his case to Supreme Court because of his husband, and that was probably the most beautiful thing about his whole case, was that he did it all out of love, and the whole thing ended up being love wins, and it was really true in his case. So it was pretty awesome to hear about that.
Yeah, that's incredible just to hear that, especially with the campus connection, because I remember before that case was decided and gay marriage became legalized, that was in late June, I believe. Yeah. I remember seeing the Facebook pages and groups were like, "Oh, shame on Ohio," And I'm like, guys, we're not that bad of a state. It was the legislation, and I've had a few great friends who are gay, and one of them, they had to get married up in New York, and they moved up to New York, and I do miss them dearly because of that, and that was all because of that decision, because they wanted to go to a more friendly LGBT state, and it's just wonderful that it's now legalized across the nation. It's good.
Well, and aside from the fact that, it's terrible that to be a state that, is viewed as not accepting all of your residents, but you at some point have to sort of look at it from an economic standpoint, where you're losing a significant amount of people who are moving out of your state, who are no longer shopping at your businesses, who are no longer paying your taxes,
right,
because you're not willing to accept who they are.
Exactly. And I think that legalizing this, this summer, I feel like alone was a very, very LGBTQ focused summer. We had the coming out of Caitlyn Jenner, and that was, although it's, trans, it's not exactly gay, it's still a very big decision. It's a celebrity making a face for this community, and then, with the legalization of gay marriage, that was also a lot of attention. So I just feel like this summer alone has brought a lot of awareness to people, and but a little bit more of an accepting atmosphere, and even if not so accepting, more aware. People are more aware that there are different types of issues like this, which is the first step to, I guess, accepting.
Yeah, I think we're definitely in a progressive era right now with everything that's happening. You know, we're getting a lot more advocacy for the trans community, like you said, but also LGBT communities have been, you know, pushing for this for so long, and just to see it, you know, finally come into play and see everything work out the way it did was really beautiful and inspiring. And I think it makes America is working towards being a more inclusive country, which, you know, we've always struggled with in the past with things like racism and obviously sexism and all that stuff. So for that to be legalized, for that to be complete, for the idea of marriage, which should be a right to everyone, to be completely inclusive and you can marry whomever you want, is really an amazing thing for America, I think.
And what a time to be alive as well. I mean, it was our grandparents, they can remember civil rights in the 60s, but it seems like we're definitely in, I wouldn't want to coin this decade the second civil rights decade, but I mean, just to be alive and be able to say, like to our grandkids, hey, I remember that day, that decision, and how much we rejoice as a nation and the world as a whole.
I just remember the world just blowing up. You know, I didn't even know that this was going to happen that day. I didn't even know that there was this debate was being talked about and it was being decided today. I had no idea, and then all of a sudden, this huge movement just blew up, and it was kind of shocking and also good for our nation, good for many people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Definitely. Well, coming up when we return, we will discuss the tragic shootings that happened this morning about both Northern Arizona University and Texas Southern University. Stay with us. Welcome back to BG24 News Producers Panel. Early this morning at Northern Arizona University, a shooting occurred when a fight broke out on campus. The shooter, who has been identified as Stephen Jones, a freshman at the school, was taken into campus police custody after opening fire on students, leaving one student dead and 3 others in the hospital. The tragedies did not stop at NAU. A shooting also occurred this morning at Texas Southern University, where a student was shot dead and another wounded at an apartment complex near TSU's campus. Because of this, the university has been on lockdown and classes have been canceled. Houston police say a possible suspect is in custody. Well, I am struggling, I'm internally struggling with, is it like sort of a domino effect? You know, we had a shooting that happened at a community college last week, and now we saw 2 others this morning. Is it sort of like, you know, you see what
becoming it's a reaction?
Yeah.
That's what they should do. When I saw what we were going to be talking about today, I heard about the first shooting, and then I realized that there were 2. There were 2 separate situations today, which I had no idea about, and I was kind of taken aback because we had just talked about this last week. We had talked about how this was a problem, especially within schools and on campuses. You know, we feel safest at school. A lot of kids, as we mentioned last week, feel that relief when they go to school. You know, they are from lower class neighborhoods, lower income neighborhoods, and when they go to school, they get that relief. And now school is becoming a point where we're all associating it with shootings, and that's not okay, especially for a learning environment.
Yeah, and what you were saying about the domino effect as well, that's one thing that they find with these shootings, and it dates back to Columbine. They learn from them, they build from them. You know, what could I do? What could grow from that? And just seeing a flurry of them afterwards. I mean, 2 after a big one like that, that's probably the most extreme case, but they study these other cases, and to see it pop up like that is very alarming. And just the idea, I mean, I feel safe here at Bowling Green, but I don't know anymore.
It can happen to anyone, is what you're trying to say.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's alarming, is the fact that we just talked about this happening in Oregon, and it was a mass shooting there. I mean, it wasn't the same large scale at both of these universities, but still,
it happened.
People died. People are injured, and it's just, you know, President Obama just last week gave that address and saying how we are numb to this. Are we at the point now where we're just shaking it off? It's literally, these shootings are trending on Twitter, like it's all over the place, and it doesn't really seem to phase anything. You know, the shooter in Arizona was 18 years old. What does an 18-year-old boy, and I say boy because you're not an adult yet. And what do you need a gun for? And why do you have it on campus? And it's like, if you're even having a verbal argument with someone, on a
Why are you
campus,
Yeah, what
why do
merits
you have
a gun?
Yeah, nothing merits a gun. And I think that, does President Obama need to make an executive decision in regards to gun control? Are we going to get to that point? I don't know. When are we really going to talk about it? And when are we really going to do something about it? Because
and they say that your brain is not fully developed until, I think they say 25.
Yeah.
Which would be
It's
why
different for male and female.
But male and
actually.
female, but which would be why you cannot buy alcohol until you're 21, because they believe you make decisions on impulse, which is exactly what we saw today. I mean, that kid probably got that gun not 6 months before today,
exactly.
and just because he can. And I think you're right. I think we might reach a point where they're either going to raise the age on having, being able to purchase a gun or having a concealed carry license, which I believe is still 21 to have concealed carry license. I'm not positive about that. But yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing these young kids, and I don't think that the media is helping this at all. I think the media is feeding
glorify in the media, shootings and mass shootings, and it's not right, and that is why we are numb to it. We are in such an age now with technology and social media, and obviously we're all within media, so there is no shame in media, but being constantly exposed to these kinds of images, we do become numb to it. There is no doubt. So when are we going to get to that point where enough is enough and we're really going to take action against it?
If I had to say when the point will come, I don't know what it's going to take, because it is a Democrat and Republican issue with this gun control. What Obama had to say was moving. I don't remember. What I distinctly remember was what Jeb Bush had to say. I mean, did you hear the quote? This is it, word for word. Stuff happens.
That's not.
You don't talk about it like that.
That's not what you say to someone whose family was just impacted by that.
No, it's not a party issue. We need to come together as a nation and talk about this. I was at Walmart getting supplies to go back to school, and there was maybe a 13-year-old boy, and they had they sell airsoft guns, which are like mini guns of the real thing. And the cashier at Walmart was going, to the mom, is he 16? And she's like, this is my gun.
Right.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Don't kid yourself. It is not your gun. It is clearly for him. And if it's this fantasy in America about owning a gun and, I gotta, pew, pew, or whatever it is, it needs to be addressed. And just
it needs to be we need to have proper education. We need to take small steps, but we definitely need to take a step forward with this issue.
What's it going to take to get that initial step going?
I think it will be an issue that will still come up here in the coming weeks, and we'll keep you updated.
You're right.
Coming up when we return, we will be discussing a UCLA party that has students protesting and people everywhere talking. Stay with us. Yesterday, many UCLA students crammed into the office of the Chancellor, Gene Block, chanting, "Black Bruins Matter." The protest was sparked after some UCLA students wore blackface to a Kanye West-themed fraternity party. The protesters, demanding a response to the racism, held signs reading, "Our culture is not a costume." I can't say I disagree with them, to be honest with you. That anybody's culture, not just African Americans, not just Hispanic people, it's not a costume.
Right.
It's, I'm a part of Greek life here on campus. I'm in a sorority, and we were told to never ever show up into any kind of party with any kind of culture. We were not allowed to dress up like a Hispanic, no sombreros, no ponchos, and my God, we would never be allowed to do something like that, so I'm not really sure where they thought that would have been okay.
I was reading an article on this, and it was talking about, the fraternity actually didn't intend for it to be like that. This was a lot of the guests that showed up. Dressing up like Kanye West or like, the Kardashians and being them for Halloween is one thing. People do that in, light humor all the time, but to physically paint your face black and portray a culture is something that back in the 20s was done to symbolize somewhat buffoons and to be offensive. And so to do that nowadays, where's there a difference? Where do you think is there a difference?
That's my point. It's literally 2015. Why are we still talking about things about blackface? I mean, it happened from the 20s to the 70s. I mean, anything on television, if there was a black character there, they were not actual black people, they were white people, who were in blackface, which is obviously demeaning to black people. It just is. So I just don't understand how college students, people getting an education, can literally do that and think it's like funny or anything. I mean, culture, to do that to black culture, which is what the protesters are arguing and saying, our culture isn't a costume, because, you know, it's one thing to reappropriate black culture because it happens all the time, but it's another thing to mock it. It's just, it's disgusting. I just can't believe that in this like day and age that we're still talking about blackface.
It doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, if you're going to mock Kanye, you can have a plain white T-shirt and write $80 on it, because he's selling T-shirts for $80. That's funny. And college kids, we're a fairly intelligent bunch, I'd say. And the fact that you've made it that far and you think, oh, I'm going to do blackface. No, you should know by now that's wrong. Like you said, it's 2015. This should not be an issue.
Right.
Like, it just drives me up a wall that people can be that stupid to think, oh, this is going to be cool. No, it's not.
And the fact that it's receiving national attention, you know, we're talking about today, we don't talk about things that are just go under the rug. This is something that people are looking up everywhere. They're taking to Twitter, social media, which is getting a lot of attention, both sides. And I don't really feel as if this is a both-sided argument. As this is a both-sided argument, you know. It's definitely something that is relevant. One side, it's wrong.
I would like to ask, you know, those students that chose to show up to the party that night. Now, you know, did it ever at one point cross your mind that this might be offensive? You know, there is a historical reference here, or I'm just going to try to make my costume as convincing as possible. I'm just going to paint my face black. You know, and either way, I think it's wrong. You know, I don't think, oh, ignorance is bliss. You know, if you just didn't know, then, you know, you don't get pulled over for a speeding ticket and say, oh, well, I didn't know the speed limit, and they don't let you off.
No.
You know, you should have had some consideration for somebody that was not, you know, yourself or your friends that were all showing up like that.
Exactly, and I think it's just that maybe if there's some sort of miseducation with what, you know, black oppression has been and throughout the eras of time, and, you know, if people didn't know what blackface was, well, that's a problem in itself. You know, why don't people understand, especially people who aren't black and who aren't minorities, why don't people understand what minorities have been through? I think that's probably one of the main issues that stem here, is that maybe those kids really didn't know what blackface was or how highly offensive it was. And that's a bigger problem than them doing blackface, because it's like, if you don't know what blackface is, then how much do you even know about, you know, the black oppression, the civil rights movement, and anything to do with black people?
Yes.
It's a part of history. It's a part of development of the gaining of civil rights. You know, that was something that was fought back then. Shouldn't be something we are fighting with now, certainly.
And I think this has really sort of put a bad light on Greek life, particularly men in fraternities. You know, we dealt with, I can't remember exactly what fraternity it was that was doing the chanting on the bus, that dealt with some severe racial slurs.
Yeah.
And now we're dealing with this,
you know,
another fraternity that was not respectful of culture.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think it really sheds a poor light on the Greek community, because, you know, the Greek community has so many stereotypes within it, fraternities and sororities, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every, you know, fraternity and sorority are like that, but it doesn't help the stigma that's against them already. So
Coming up next, we will be discussing the Democratic presidential candidate who is polled to be the most untrustworthy. Stay with us. Welcome back to BG24 News Producers Panel. In recent polls around the country, it has come to much surprise that many have deemed Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton the most untrustworthy candidate within the race. I don't know. I suppose I probably would have picked somebody else other than Hillary Clinton to be the most untrustworthy. I suppose I don't need to say who it is because we talk about it every week. But I think after the entire scandal with her using her personal phone for you know, emails and stuff like that, you know, that whole scandal that happened, I guess almost 8 months ago. You know, that was a long time ago.
I think this is kind of odd that we're receiving attention on Hillary, because, as you said, there's so many millions of Republican candidates that it's hard not to put your focus on Donald Trump because he's always doing something ridiculous. But the fact that this is receiving more attention and that she's now deemed untrustworthy kind of puts a setback on the Democratic Party, because she's really all they got at this point.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I mean, I think her and Bernie Sanders right now are really up and coming and really close. I think Bernie Sanders definitely has the millennial vote compared to Hillary Clinton. I don't necessarily think if this poll is going to hurt her campaign. I do think she'll probably be the pick for the primary.
Yeah.
I don't see Bernie getting it, unfortunately, but I do think she's making strides to have a more, appealing, like, look to her.
Face.
She's been on SNL this past, like a week or two ago. Like, she's trying to appeal to us, the younger generation. And I don't necessarily think this is going to hurt her. It is unfortunate, and I do think you're right that it does stem from the email scandal, but I don't think it's going to hurt her at all.
I would say that it does stem from the email scandal, but one of the things that makes Hillary untrustworthy, I mean, she is very trustworthy in comparison to our favorite Republican candidate, who, before we dive into him, because that's a whole basket of worms right there. I suppose with Hillary, she seems very political in the sense that she's been essentially political royalty, the first lady, and that was 25 years ago. And she's been in the political world and the game for a long time. So, I'm going to be more spontaneous and go to Chipotle. You've been at these ritzy politic parties. You've been all around the world involved in this kind of stuff for a long time, and that's going to deem you a little bit untrustworthy. And the emails did hurt, and adults will say Hillary all the way because that's what they know, versus I think us millennials are more open to Bernie Sanders and introducing him and going into like exploring to what he has to say as opposed to Hillary. And that's why I think that Hillary may have like a radioactive half-life that we may see burn out, and Bernie just keep on striving. And his honest campaign, I mean, I haven't seen any dirt. Like, you cannot pull up any dirt on Bernie.
Well, yeah, definitely I would say that Bernie is probably the more clean candidate when it comes to the Democrats, but I don't know. I think Hillary Clinton, regardless.
We'll be able to tell soon.
Yeah, we'll have to see here in the coming months. Well, that's it for BG24 News Producers Panel tonight. You can check out these stories and more on youtube.com/BG24News. Also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And feel free to tweet us on your thoughts about these stories and our issues. Have a good night, everyone.